We're live.
All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our council meeting for Monday, January the 30th. It's our special budget meeting tonight, so lots of excitement to unfold here over the next couple of hours. But before we get into that, we will start with playing the national anthem. We would like to begin by respectfully acknowledging that the town of Shelburne resides within the traditional territory and ancestral lands of the Anishinaabe, including the Ojibwe, Potawatomi, and Chippewa, and the people of the Three Fires Confederacy. These traditional territories upon which we live, work, play, and learn are steeped in rich Indigenous history and traditions. And it is with this statement that we declare to honor and respect the past and present connection of Indigenous peoples with this land, its waterways, and resources. And we encourage residents to review the call to action information, which can be found at the website, which is on the screen now. The reminder to members to declare any pecuniary interest that you may have in relation to any item on tonight's agenda in accordance with the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. And with that, we will jump right in. So Carrie Holmes is going to provide us with a presentation on the draft budget. And I think the intention for tonight's meeting is to keep it fairly high level. Carrie will go over the draft. I mean, if there's questions, obviously feel free to ask, but the intention tonight is not to really drill down into the finite detail or necessarily propose any changes tonight. If that's the direction the council wants to head in, then I think we'll look at setting aside a special working meeting to do that. So let Carrie sort of walk us through what the draft is tonight, and then we can all take a few days to kind of digest that before we think about circling back and doing any finer detail on it. So with that, Carrie, I will turn it over to you, and you can show us what you've been working on for the last number of weeks.
Thank you. And through the mayor, this feels like the budget that just never ends, because it's been months actually since we started working on it.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to share my screen and go through a high-level overview of the slide deck. Nope, see, we're at the end already.
That was easy. All right.
Okay. One moment here. I just have to move where you are all appearing on my screen. There we go. Okay. So good evening, Your Worship and members of council. Tonight, staff are pleased to provide you with a high-level overview of the 2023 draft budget. Here we have a table of contents, which is simply just to provide ease of reference for anyone looking to find anything specific. As discussed during the council education session that we had January 9th, the budget schedule is delayed during an election year. So this slide details how we got here and where things should progress following tonight. So on January the 23rd, we did present the budget framework to council along with the municipal grant funding committee reports, and those details are included in tonight's draft budget. Here we are tonight at a special meeting of council. We would plan on presenting the draft presentation to the public on February the 13th. If we are going to require another special meeting to do a working group night, we would probably have to schedule that for next Monday night, which I believe is February 6th. Pending the public presentation of the budget, the council would then pass a resolution at the February 27th meeting. And then at the March 13th meeting, staff would bring back a bylaw to adopt the budget. If by chance there are no changes after the February 13th public meeting, council can, if they wish, pass a resolution that night. And then that would mean that staff would bring the bylaw back on February the 27th for adoption. So it just speeds the process up by 2 weeks and we would be done in February. So a balanced budget involves municipal expenses and revenues, and the funding gap is the amount that is required to be raised by taxation. In this budget before you tonight, the amount is just over $9 million that we would be required to collect from the tax base. Last week, we brought a budget framework report, which included 6 points in the motion of council. And I've outlined those here in summary tonight as well, which included a 1% increase in the tax rate, which is an overall tax levy increase of 5.3. We also included the new staffing resources and the recommended market compensation check that was done. And those take effect Q2 and Q3 in this budget. We also introduced the use of the tax stabilization reserve again. We had put that in the 2022 budget and did not need to use it, but we have budgeted once again for 2023 to utilize $200,000 from it. And we've also requested in advance that $400,000 from the 2022 surplus be put into an equipment reserve. And that is to cover the equipment needs that are identified in the budget for 2023 and 2024. And then finally, point 6, and to me, this is probably the most important, is it's important to stress because a 0% tax increase only ends up in costing more in the long run. When you take into consideration risk management, best practices, life cycle costing, long-term budget planning, a 0% tax rate increase does not fit into that equation. And it has been proven that having a 0% tax increase only costs more money in future years. And as council knows, we will be working on the 2024 budget starting in this fall. And any indication from looking at the outer years that are in this draft budget, you can see that the tax rate will already be probably 3 to 4% increase in the 2024 draft. Before you, we have a revenue comparison. And while this chart shows an overall increase of 2.92% in revenues, the actual levy increase was 5.33 required to achieve the tax levy, required to achieve the revenue increase of 2.92. You will notice from the explanations in the last column that the decrease in revenues is mostly attributed to the decrease in transfers from reserves in order to fund operating and capital budgets. Some revenue areas that have increased and have recovered since COVID are areas such as POA revenues, bank interest, and facility rental income. As always, staff continue to source any grant funding opportunities, and several of these were listed within the budget framework report last week. There are sadly many projects that are identified within the draft budget that will not be carried out unless grant funding is achieved. And all the grant funding is included in this revenue comparison. One of the decreases you will notice in revenue is the top line, which is for the police. For 2023, we no longer have to borrow from the special accommodation levy in order to fund the disbandment of the police services. So this is the first year that we're able to recognize that revenue. And although it shows as a decrease in revenue when you compare year over year, it's also offset by the decrease in the expense side, which you will see right here. So in keeping with a balanced budget, the expenditures also have to have a 2.92% increase. And as identified in the budget framework, the town continues to face significant financial pressures and increased expenses in order to respond to the service and amenity expectations and the needs for a small town that continues to experience significant growth. More specifically, this budget includes insurance premium increases, fuel and utility increases, CPI tied to existing contracts, vehicles and equipment cost increases. Legislated training requirements is affecting some of the fire services budget, as you will notice. And a draft copy of that budget was provided for comment in the agenda package, and we can discuss that in more detail following this presentation. You will notice from the explanation column that the majority of the increases in costs can be attributed to staffing resources, realignments, and weekend and evening coverage attributed to growth. And the future implementation of projects and other recommended enhanced services are dependent on acquiring the staffing resources required to carry out those amenities. So homeowner tax impact, sorry. So in this budget, we did recognize assessment growth of 4.3%. The overall tax levy increase is 5.3%, which equates to a 1% increase in the tax rate. And on an average assessed home of $335,366, this amounts to $2.18 per month, or $26.12 per year.
Sorry, Carrie, what is an average home?
Okay, so on the next slide, I can show you some assessments here. So we've got some samples just from around town, William Street, Highland Village, we've got single family, townhouses, mature subdivisions, old subdivisions. So there's some assessment variations for you. And again, because MPAC has not changed the assessment, we are still using the 2016 base rates as everyone else in the province is. So there's no fluctuation in as far as phase-in goes. We only have the growth, which we are lucky to have because we are still in the middle of development. So this provides an example of so a single family home, for example, in Highland Village, which is one of the newer subdivisions, the assessment is $493,000 on some of those homes. So they would have an annual increase of $38 or a monthly increase of $3.20.
Okay. So the newer subdivisions are the ones that are going to be facing the greater increases, basically, on your comparator.
Most likely, yes.
Thank you.
And as included in Appendix 1 of the budget framework report was the organizational chart. So I've just stuck that in here again. It's the same chart that you saw last week. And where your tax dollars go, I've always included this, this slide. Other protective services includes by law enforcement, crossing guards, and conservation. Public Works is now identified as operations, and it includes cemetery, waste management, and storm sewers. Planning and development includes the BIA and the economic development budget. Recreation and culture includes the town's share of the CDRC and the library, as well as heritage, local cultural grants, the Fiddle Park, and town events. For general capital projects for 2023, we have just over $5.3 million, and approximately 33% of that figure will only proceed if the town is successful in obtaining the grants for the projects. And those include the Connecting Link grant, the Grace Tippling Hall revitalization, gateway signs, and the downtown revitalization, all of which we are applying for grants for to help fund those projects. There are several planned purchases of various equipment for operations, parks, and recreation in accordance with the 5-year capital plan and the asset management plan. And we also have carryover of projects, for example, the splash pad, fencing at Highland Park, playground equipment for Walters Creek Park that were budgeted for in 2022, but carried over into 2023. And to fund those projects, the goal is to provide worthy projects that have already been identified as shovel-ready and are therefore majorly funded through the buildup of reserves, donations, and development charges, in addition to any grants that are available at the time. You will notice out of the capital projects identified for 2023, $0 are being funded from the tax base. And council is already aware that the water and sewer budgets are self-contained and do not affect the tax rate or the tax levy. The water and sewer rate bylaw was adopted in 2020, which sets the rates for the year. The amount of revenue generated from rates is based on estimated usage, which is derived from looking at past history and future growth. While the year-over-year increases in both the metered rate and the base rate is shown on this slide, the actual dollar value increase in revenue is 7% for water and 9% for sewer. The town will be acquiring the services of an outside consultant to conduct an updated water and sewer rate study with the results to take effect in 2024. And the 10-year aqua contract that expires in 2029 is tied to inflation, and this year has increased 6.9% as indicated. For water and sewer capital projects for 2023, they total just under $8 million, and the majority of this cost is a carryover from 2022's unfinished projects or multi-year projects, such as the water tower and well 3 rehabilitation. We also issued an RFP for a water truck in 2022, but the delivery of that truck has not happened, so it has become a 2023 expense, and that has carried over as well. One new item that we do have identified is the drilling of well 9, which was actually missed in the 5-year capital plan, but was in the DC study and is funded by DCs, and that project is slated to begin in 2023. So we have added that to the 2023 budget. And I've also identified on here the 2 reports that gave an in-depth analysis of the water and sewer future needs and funding gaps, and those were presented last week to council. The following funding sources are recognized to cover capital costs attributed to water and sewer. You will notice that reserves are funding 30% of both water and sewer capital projects. The 22% indicated for water DCs is mostly debt payments attributed to the water tower and well 7. The grant for the well 3 rehabilitation is included and was a significant amount, showing 45% of the funding source, and that was a $3.5 million grant. Very little is being pulled from the operating water and sewer rates. They are sitting at 1% each. So this is the annual chart that you're all used to seeing. The only difference being that the water storage tower has now been added to the bottom, and we've started making our monthly payments for that. It is generally considered practical to ensure that your reserve balances at least equal your debt. So at the end of 2023, we're showing a debt balance of 7.7 million, with the next loans to come off in 2026. And our reserves are sitting at the end of 2023, estimated to be at 10.5 million. So as mentioned in earlier slide decks, there were many projects in 2022 that were multi-year and carried over into 2023. And for that reason, the reserve transfers that we had planned in 2022 did not take place because the offsetting expense did not take place. So you're seeing all of those flow into the 2023 reserve schedule now. And as also previously mentioned tonight, any corresponding reserve that is tied to a grant application will also not occur if the town is not successful in acquiring the grant. This still leaves the town sitting with a pretty healthy reserve balance of 10.5 million, keeping in mind that this balance does not include development charge reserves. In February, the annual DC attestation from the treasurer will come to council, and that will show a DC reserve balance at the end of 2022 at approximately 17.2 million. A point of interest for some of the DC reserves that we do have is that with respect to water anyway, the majority of the reserves that are sitting there are building so that we can pay the debt for the water tower and for well 7. And that's the end of the presentation for tonight. And if you have any questions, and I'm sure we'll have a couple other items to discuss. I'll just stop sharing my screen. There was a couple of items that I clicked too fast past the one slide on revenue. On expenditures. I just wanted to point out a couple of the big cost drivers. Council will remember that we did enter into an agreement with the County of Dufferin for IT services, and that was a phased in costing at 35% last year, 65% this year, and 100% next year. So that attributes to a portion of the administration increase. As well, the town hall did hook up to fiber so that we could have, I think there's 4 of us here tonight in the town hall, all streaming live. And I hopefully five of us, right? I can't count. Hopefully the fiber does what it's supposed to do and none of us have any issues that way. We also have weekend transit, which in 2022 was offset by a transfer from reserves to help share in the cost of that. This year, there is no transit reserve to pull from. So the full expenditure is hitting the bottom line, although it is prorated and does not start until April 1st, I believe, or March 1st. As far as the staffing goes, council's aware of the increase with the operations. We have also increased crossing guards because the new development out at Fieldgate will soon require that we have crossing guards for that subdivision to get the kids over to Centennial Highlands. So those were just a couple of things. I clicked too fast before I got to say identify those for you.
Carrie, would you mind trying to explain how impact assessment works, just for the benefit of members of the public who may be watching? I know it's sort of a complicated thing to explain, but just kind of the Coles Notes version of how that whole system operates.
Well, in a normal assessment year, there would be a phase-in approach. So, for example, they gave the assessment values in 2016 with a 4-year phase-in, and so whatever your assessment was increasing at that time, they divided it evenly amongst 4 years so that the homeowner wouldn't see a huge spike in their assessment. What that means for the municipality is as each year's assessment comes on board, municipalities have the opportunity to either utilize that increase in assessment and keep their tax rate the same, which brings in more tax dollars, so your tax levy, or municipalities can lower their tax rate so that the offset of the increase in assessment is reduced by the reduction in the tax rate. Does that make sense? But because of COVID and no phase in assessment, we are still working on 2016 values. And I'm not sure, I don't think we've been promised yet that there will be any change to that for 2024. But if there is, what it means to the taxpayer is it depends what the municipality does with the tax rate as to how that ends up affecting the taxpayer. When phase-in occurs, it's usually market value assessment based on house sales of the day. So someone who's in a neighborhood where a lot of sales have taken place may see a bigger change in their own personal assessed value as opposed to someone, across town who's, maybe has an older home or it has not changed hands or sold, or no improvements have been done to it. There's so many variables that play into an assessed value. So it really is a hard thing to decipher and to promise to the public what they will be paying, because everybody's assessment's different.
And that's an important point. And I've had that discussion with a few residents over the past couple of years. They wonder why, that their annual tax bill relative to, somebody that they know across town is different. Why is so-and-so paying less than I'm paying? And, that's not equitable. And I've explained that, that's not up to us. We're not the ones who make those assessments. We set the tax rate, and it's the same rate, across the board for every, residential property in town. But, you very well may be paying more than somebody, on the other side of town because your house has been valued or assessed at a higher value by impact than theirs has been. Mm-hmm. And Councillor Donato, raised the point on that one slide where you listed a number of assessed values. So, the average increase based on the draft budget is going to be $26.12 per year. But even on the high end of that scale, it's only $38.39 a year. So, it's not a dramatic change in terms of real dollars.
The other thing to keep in mind too is that is just the town portion.
Exactly.
So depending what the county's tax rate does, we've already been told the school tax rates are staying the same.
Good. All right. Questions for Carrie? Oh, Denise.
Thanks, Mayor Mills. So as part of the council education sessions, one of the options is us having a representative MPAT come to speak to council, even for half an hour, just to overview the current, as Carrie mentioned, that we're still on 2016 assessments, what overall that means, how does your taxes correlate, if any, to your assessment. And just, I think they have a couple of great videos, which we have on our website, but I think because you're a new council, many of you are returning, obviously, that it might be a great opportunity as well for education to the community. So we'll probably look at scheduling that in March or April.
Yeah, and not only for the 7 of us, but as you say, I think, some members of the community may be interested in better understanding how that whole system works. Questions? Councillor Wagner.
Yes, thanks very much. I have a very not good voice right now.
Too much hockey.
I was
on
at
the
a hockey
weekend.
tournament with my daughter all weekend, so I was a little bit too much of a hockey mom. So
I can't imagine.
right, you guys know me. So we brought home gold though, so it's worth it. So Carrie, you mentioned that if we don't receive sort of the grant funding for the gateway signs, that it won't progress. But I'm sure, as all of us know around the table, that our gateway signs are in pretty disarray and they don't look very good. So just wondering if we don't get the grant, how we can go about making sure that we do sort of fund the project to make sure that we get some gateway signs, because it does reflect, coming into the town with visitors and whatnot, how we present ourselves. So we do need to have those done.
It may just be that that the project is delayed by a year.
Okay, so it's still kind of like, it will be in the works anyways to kind of make sure that we fund it.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much, guys.
So, sorry, I'll just interject there, Councillor Regner, as well. What we could also look, as opposed to doing all four at once, we could probably stage it where we do one or two. So obviously the one in front of the field gate development, which we've held off until all of that construction is done, we could come back to council in the absence of a grant and look at what potentially could be done still possibly in 2023 based on a staging approach.
Councillor Bernardo, you're muted.
I hate Zoom. Anyway, the question on the gateway signs, because we have to move them due to growth, is there any potential use of DCs for that?
Probably not. I don't think we identified that as an upcoming capital project in the DC study. That would kind of be a bit of a stretch because we are replacing them.
Okay. Well, there's always hope.
Maybe if we put in bigger signs that, we need a bigger sign because our community's bigger and therefore it's tied to growth. I don't know. Probably not going to fly, but.
Oh, we are moving them and changing them because of the growth. I don't know. If there is a way we can use some DCs, maybe that can help us start some of the signs.
If nothing else, you get bonus points for creativity.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm going to say sorry. Sorry. The likelihood of there being DC eligibility probably would be seen in other people's application for signs, which we've never applied DCs to signs. We're also, been fairly confident and successful with some of the grants that are related to such capital infrastructure. So that's why we didn't include it as a non-funded opportunity. So if we could just ride it out to see if we're successful with the grant funding from central counties. And then if we don't get all of it, like we said, we could stage it, but we're still hoping because of that priority through the province for that kind of initiative that we might be successful with the grant.
Did I miss when we might know this? If I did, I apologize for asking it. But do we know when they're going to have an answer for us?
I'm not sure myself. I would think we would know by the end of Q1.
So by the end of March, usually, because the fiscal of the province is March 31st, and they're usually looking at making the decisions for the new fiscal in April or May or June of the next year.
We've been successful in the past with grant applications through them, right? So
We have, yeah. I don't think the grant funded all of it. There was a portion that we had to make up ourselves, and then I know Carol was looking at applying for additional funding as well. So we'll just have to wait and see.
I think actually our original LED sign by the beer store was funded through that grant, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Are we also funding lighting as a part of that? Solar lighting or whatever form of lighting, so it lights up in the evening?
Do you know, Denise? I'm not sure.
I'd have to look at
What it
the
was for.
specifications. Usually it's a generic type of sign and then you can amend it as you see fit. So let me follow up what we included in terms of the sign amenities.
Yeah, because I know we've spoken way back in the past about lighting up those signs, making them maybe solar lighting up so that they are visible in the evening when people are driving through, knowing that they're coming into the municipality.
All right. Any other questions? No? All right. Can I have a motion then to receive the draft 2023 budget presentation? Moved by Deputy Mayor.
Sorry, Wade. I do have one question.
Yeah, sorry.
I was trying to get my unmute button to work and it wasn't working. I just on page 22, line item 7257, BI expansion study. We put $5,000 in that in 2022, and that's to carry over into 2023. Am I understanding that right? Is that what happened there? Or?
Sorry.
Page 22, line item 7257.
So actually, no. So we had put 5,000 in for that, and
Yep.
the study did not happen. So there was no budget for it, and we're not budgeting for it in 2023.
Okay.
The Denise can expand on that.
Please do.
Councillor Sample, the BIA had indicated to us that they could support the project through their own funding. I believe that they're allocating $25,000 to that endeavor. We certainly, as the town, are facilitating and assisting with a significant amount of work once the project gets underway. And we would have our own internal costs, mostly staff dedicated to this review, and potentially some planning related costs. But we'll have to bring a report back to council probably in Q2 on the process that the town has to undertake to facilitate and support an expansion by the BIA. Their costs, my understanding is that they are having resources, humans, to help them with the project, and they've hired somebody to help work with the existing businesses as well as those that they're hoping would become part of the new association through an expansion.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so the motion moved by Deputy Mayor Hall, seconded by Councillor Bernardo. All in favor? It's carried. All right, so the next report is from our CAO regarding weekend transit service and some potential route adjustments.
Thank you, Mayor Mills. So the information with respect to the cost is something that we identified in the budget framework. It was also identified in the report last term with respect to the continuation of transit for the weekend service and the decision of council at that time to suspend the service as of the end of 2022 to allow the new council to make the decision on whether or not the continued service would be proceeded with or that it would be discontinued. So as part of the analysis, and council had all of the information in the old report, which is linked through this report on the ridership, there was a summary of what people were using it for. And the route, as council will recall, starts in Owen Sound with respect to where the bus launches from. Our leg of this Grey County service is from Southgate and Dundalk of Southgate, and then it proceeds through Shelburne with 4 stops during the weekday. and the weekend, and then proceeds on to Orangeville. What we did indicate in the past is what was unique about weekend service in Orangeville is it didn't provide the kind of connection that many were looking for during the week, and that was predominantly GO. So with respect to the costs of running from Shelburne to Orangeville, that's not insignificant with respect to the fuel as well as the time. So based on looking at a more Shelburne-based service, we reviewed with Grey County the option to instead realign the costs that were utilized to run from Shelburne to Orangeville and keep all of that expense dedicated to Shelburne. And by virtue of looking at that type of routing, we could have 5 dedicated hours per day on Saturday and Sunday and a continual loop based on approximately 30 minutes. The cost for that service is about $6,300. And that would mean additional stops, as was asked in the past, could be added because it would be in Shelburne only on the weekend. This certainly doesn't impact the weekday. And we could also look at adding additional stops, again, in consultation with Grey County as requested at the last meeting of council, whether that be on William or Simon or anywhere else in town. The difference on the weekday stops is that Grey County or the service needs to be in Orangeville in order for those users and riders to connect with the GO, should they be going on to Brampton or anywhere else with respect to their end destination. So really that's it in a summary. I've reiterated that council had asked previously that we establish a route at the new plaza at Fieldgate. I had identified in the prior report that there are a number of challenges, unfortunately, which I know might be frustrating for many on the establishment of a stop there or stops. And the reason being is that the plaza owner has not traditionally allowed in any of their other developments transit to enter. Completely understand and appreciate that that traditionally is about risk mitigation and insurance impacts. And the other issue is until the town assumes those roads, somebody driving on those roads in a good way, I guess, can't make a claim against the town of Shelburne, and they are actually roads owned by the developer. So the Grey County transit operation isn't, like we would as well, going to operate any services on unassumed roads due to insurance issues unless the town had the exclusive policy to insure them and take on all risk. We haven't explored that because we don't think that's a starter, not only with our insurer, but just the legal ramifications of an agreement of that magnitude. So we're going to continue to review what roads in close proximity or as close as we can get to Fieldgate might make sense for an interim stop until we assume roads. Jim tells me, he can pop on if he wants, that might not be till September, but we're hoping if there's any way we can assume partial or even parts of the pumping station, that might provide us with a spot that's about as close as we can get. So that's the summary of the report. The recommendation is that the revised routes, so that we have a concentration in the town of Shelburne on the weekends, is supported and approved by council. And of course, pending that the budget is approved, and we expect you would be looking at that by the end of March. And as Carrie mentioned, this would allow us to reinstate the weekend service, most likely April to mid-April 2023. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Councilor Bernardo.
First of all, thank you very much for the report, Denise. That's something that I know I've talked to a lot of residents, especially the seniors, and that's something they're really looking forward to because it will assist with them getting to shopping. Have we looked at the county roads going down, stopping, say, at No Frills, maybe at the Wigglesworth Plaza, somewhere in that area there? Is there a possibility of setting up a stop? And Jim, maybe you can answer that.
Just going to jump in before Jim does. We did originally explore if we could go into the No Frills Plaza, and it's the same issue with a private operator and private lands. They require significant legal agreements as well as insurance to be on their property. The issue that we had faced before, as well as looking at when we were looking at stopping as close to the No Frills as we could, was just the busyness of the intersection at 124 and 89 and providing a safe place for people to enter and get off of the bus. As you said, Councillor Bernardo, we could look at County Road, safer spots on 124, closer to the Wrigglesworth Plaza. And if we can establish, even at the new lights where the advanced screen is, that we can make some kind of safe spot. Again, this is up to the operator of the service to review that with staff and give us their assessment of what's going to work. And Gray is already aware of this report. And we hope to actually be setting up a meeting in the near future to discuss potential other stops.
I mean, realistically, if a bus could stop at Tim Hortons and people go in for coffee, you know, that's sort of my thought process. At least you're close enough in that sense to be there. So hopefully you can find something in around 124 then that you can stop at. But thank you very much, and hopefully we do get that done. And I'd like the weekend service. At least it gives the people an opportunity for shopping.
Councillor Fegan.
Just a point of clarification. So Denise, this report you're presenting, the thought process is that this is going to be an internal Shelburne route with a dedicated 5-hour service for within Shelburne?
Yes. So what would be happening is, opposed to the previous weekend route that went from Dundalk to Shelburne to Orangeville, which we were still paying for all weekend, it would no longer go to Orangeville. And by virtue of not going to Orangeville, we free up that time and the associated costs, which was the driver and the fuel. And then instead of having only 4 stops in Shelburne twice a day, you would have a dedicated 5-hour loop in Shelburne on the weekends. And then it would still, after it's finished in Shelburne, it would return going back to Southgate and then back to Owen Sound, because that's where the vehicles are maintained and stored. But this significantly enhances the presence of the transit in Shelburne, probably by 4 hours a day on the weekends.
Absolutely. Perfect. Thank you very much.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, so we need a motion just to receive the report and essentially to approve the route adjustment in principle, pending final approval through our budget. Moved by Councillor Gashardi. Seconder for that, Councillor Sample. All in favor? Carried. All right, thanks, Denise. All right, next up is a discussion on the draft 2023 Shelburne and District Fire Board budget. So that's in the package as well. Carrie, did you want to introduce that?
Sure, thank you, through the mayor. This was sent out by the secretary of the fire board, and she had asked or included a motion from the board that said the budget with adjustments to wages and legal be distributed to municipalities for review and comment. So I did have a look at the operating budget when they sent it out, and I had suggested a couple of amendments to it that I had noticed. So the secretary did reply back on Friday saying that she agreed with the amendments that I had made. So the actual overall increase is more than the 34.21% that is identified in the draft budget. It's actually 38%. So I have included that increase in the town's draft budget on page 25 of the operating budget. It deals with fire, and because we had over budgeted in 2022, because at the time when we passed the 2022 budget, we didn't have the fire board's budget. So I had estimated what it would come in at, and it came in lower. So the overall increase for us as the town still ends up being 34%, because I've added 38% to the 2022 actual for us. So in the end, it does end up being an increase of $158,000 for the town. A lot of it, I believe, and the fire board members can verify that. It is related, it appears, to training, which I believe is legislated and required training that all firefighters must have, volunteer or not. And other than that, I can't really speak to it.
It is, Carrie's correct. A lot of it is related to training. They've changed the mode of training. Used to be the Ontario Fire College. It's not that anymore. Now it's spread out. They have to bring in a trainer to train and bring the firefighters up to the levels that they need to come up to. That's a cost, unfortunately. There's also, if they do go out and have to get training outside of that, there's a cost for them to enter into whatever place they go for training. So it's not fair to the firefighter to bear the cost. It's they're already taking time off work to do that, plus they are paying for the fuel or whatever to get to wherever they're going out of their pocket. So to add the cost of the training on top of that is just adding pain or injury to what they're doing. So I think, and Shane can confirm it with me, but that's basically why the increase to the cost is there. It's a mandated thing that, like Carrie said, that they have to do. It's not a choice. It's not something that they can get out of. And this budget, the fire chief and secretary, they went over it with a fine tooth comb and cut wherever they could cut. And there was unfortunately no way out of the training.
Deputy Mayor Hall, I think the plan is to discuss this further at the next meeting on the 7th.
I don't know where the background was coming from, but yeah, you're correct, Your Worship.
So correct, it should be discussed in the next fire board meeting. As Councillor Bernardo mentioned, it's really the downloading of the training costs. As mentioned, one location previously with Fire College, which also had a accommodation aspect that went with it, has now turned into something that's far from. So you can see the majority of that cost sitting on that line item. But as mentioned, this will be another discussion point that'll come up in our next fire board meeting next week.
All right. Any questions on that? The deputy mayor and I are sharing a room here tonight for the meeting, so there's a bit of background back and forth until we get our volumes turned down. Okay, if there is no discussion on that, we'll just get a motion to receive that draft. Moved by Councillor Bernardo, second by Councillor Fegan. All in favor? It's carried. Okay, so before we get on to just wrapping up here, what are thoughts for a working meeting next Monday night? Councillor Sample, I know you're kind of familiar with the process. Councillor Gashardi, typically what we do is we set aside one meeting where we kind of roll up our sleeves and go through things with a eye to finer detail, and that's really our opportunity to make proposed adjustments to the draft that staff has produced. And we kind of vote on those on a per proposal basis and see if they fly or not.
Yep, I'm good for that.
Okay. Does that work for everybody? Okay. 6 or 6:30? What's
6:30 would be my preference.
6 is a little tight, I think, for some.
6:30 is good for me, and we're doing it in person, right?
I'd like to.
Yes.
That one, I think that would be easier. Yeah, I mean, this was good for the slideshow that was
Sure.
awesome.
Yeah,
But
gotcha on that.
I think for that one it would be easier if we can kind of sit together around a table, so to speak.
Yes.
Yeah. If it's in person, then definitely 6:30.
Okay. Does that work, Jennifer?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So we'll do that then. And just one final reminder, we do have the county all councils meeting tomorrow afternoon at 3 p.m. I think it is at Menorah Park. So hopefully everybody can make it. I know it's tough because it is sort of in the middle of the afternoon. If you make it, that would be great. All right. So, Councillor Guichardi.
Quick question. Anyone else going to the meeting tomorrow want to carpool? I'm going to be, I have some extra seats.
Okay. Sounds good. Thanks for the offer. I may indulge you on that.
I'm going down as well, so I've got extra seats as well.
Okay. All right. Can I get a motion then for the confirming bylaw?
Hey, Wade, just to let you know, I can attend tomorrow.
Okay.
I just can't get out of work tomorrow, that's all.
No, like I said, I know it's a tough time for them to get away for 3 o'clock. So yeah, no,
Yep.
I'll pass on.
Unfortunately, I had a previous engagement as well. I couldn't, I had some other address today as well. I was trying, but couldn't make it.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I have Councillor Bonato to move confirming bylaws. Or a seconder? Councillor Fegan, all in favor? It's carried. And a motion to adjourn. Councillor Sample, seconded by Councillor Wegner. All in favor? Carried. All right. Thank you all. See you, some of you tomorrow and everybody